Hello, this week's video is a two-part series focusing on macros and key commands. So the first session today, we will go through the key commands that I currently use for my template and for my projects. And then next week, I will go through some of the macros that I've set up to make workflow a little bit easier. I will go through them in terms of workflow, how I typically go about analyzing or creating a track, and then anything that I've missed I will come back to and we'll do them separately. So now if we want to play back this section, I have L as a key command. I can loop this section just by pressing that. That loops the currently selected range. If I want to do a smaller range, I can just select a little block here, and then I can just simply loop that one. Let's do this one here. It's the same logic. However, now, if I want to move across a bar, I have set up Control and left and right to move left or right in line with the Quantize. So if I play back this, we're currently looping that one bar as per previously, but I can then skip across very easily and then loop the next one. If I want to loop a different range to the one selected, so this is per the Quantize for one bar, I have my Quantize values set up from Q through to E. So Q increases, whereas W decreases. So I can go all the way from 128 all the way up to triplets up here. However, because I typically use 1/16 and 1/1 regularly, I have them set up under shift. So let's put this to 1/4 for now. Shift Q goes back to 1/1. Shift W goes to 1/16. And then if I want to get granular, then I go Shift E, which is to 128. So if we have it on 1/16, I can then move across 1/16 on my timeline here and then loop that one section. I would typically do this when I have a reference track playing. I know lots of people set up various VSTs and load them in the VSTs. I find that unnecessarily cumbersome and convoluted. Instead, I have it loaded in the project. So at the moment, I will press play and you will hear my track, the one that I'm working on currently. And if I switch, I can then switch seamlessly to the reference track by pressing 0 on the keypad. As you can see there, everything has been muted except for the reference. So let's play back. You can see that it moves or plays back seamlessly with the project timeline. Those with excellent pitch will probably have recognized it's not in the same key. That's just because that's a random one of my own projects that I dumped into this template just for the purposes of this video. The way I have that set up is I have a split zone, which can be hidden or unhidden by pressing the /. So let's do that now. I have this section here, which I typically hide. The first track there is called reference. So if we play back again, and I'll alternate between the two, you will see what's happening up there. So as you saw, I was flicking back and forward between the reference, and then I moved across 2 bars very, very quickly. I also have set up a structure section here, which is really just notes to myself for things I need to focus on, or just the structure. I really have 4 colors here. The colors are basically in terms of priority or things that I'm really working on next. So I do light blue, darker blue, and then a really dark blue, and then I also have 0 to go to red. The way I have these set up is on Control Alt 1 to light blue, Control Alt 2 to medium blue, and Control Alt 3 to dark blue, and then Control Alt 0 for red. And as I said, red is one that I'm really focusing on next. So typically I should only have 1 track highlighted red, because that's what I'm working on next. But as you can see, this project has been going for a while now, and everything's become red. So I really need to step back and get some prioritization into this project again. Let's put this back to medium blue. I have a chord track set up. The chord track is just to ensure that my MIDI notes are color coded so I know what is in the key. If I can find an example of that, if I go to a lead, let's loop this one. Here you can see the notes are blue. That's because they're in the track key. If I move up, they go to red when they're outside of that key. That's when it's selected by this scale chords function here. If I turn that off to velocity, then they just go back to red or pitch or whatever you want in Cubase. I keep it on scale chords so that I know I'm in scale. In terms of navigating through the project, I have on the keypad the / to zoom out. I have the asterisk next to that to zoom in, so I can zoom in and out very quickly. I have the minus on the keypad to zoom in, and then plus to zoom out. Or the other way around, sorry. I have the plus to zoom out, and then minus to zoom in. If I want to look at this section, I can loop this for now. Let's play that back. Instead of pressing asterisk to zoom in 100 times, I simply do shift asterisk, and that maximizes it to the screen. And then I can press plus to get that bigger. At this stage, it's possible to lose focus and where you are in the project in terms of navigating the project. So I have home set up. If I press home, it goes back to a default view. So there you go, back to perfectly clean how I want it. In this case, I don't really need to focus on the reference track or the structure. So let's hide that again by pressing the / There you go. For those familiar with Cubase, you might notice that the transport is hidden and the screen is maximized. That's because I have F assigned to full screen mode. If I press F, you'll see the transport. There you go. So I typically like to work with the transport off, like that. And then I have A, S, and D to the left of the keyboard to show and hide the zones. So A does the left, S does the bottom, and then D does the right hand zone. So I can quickly go from a view like this, where everything is showing, back to maximizing the real estate on the screen. So F, full screen, get rid of left, get rid of bottom, and then get rid of right, and I have full screen. So if we loop this lead for a second, I have Z set up to view this VST or this instrument, and then similarly Z closes it. If, however, that was a sampler track, let's loop this one. We don't really need to loop it, so let's just select it. Z, instead of opening the VST, because there isn't one, it opens the sample track. Next to that, I have X, which opens up the channel strip. So there we go. I can put on the EQ or whatever we need, or play with the channel strip setting itself. If when working on individual parts, so let's loop these two for a second. Currently, these are two separate parts. I can press G to glue them, and it glues them together like that. It might be that I have automation on a lead to show all automation for the project. I press Shift at, and then it shows the automation. Again, I press Home if I want to go back to my default view, which is there. Let's say I'm working on a lead, so let's select this one and loop it. If I want to do something like a grid synth or want to cut this up, I typically don't like to delete information where I had information previously. Instead, I mute it. So we can play this back. So let's select the quantize length. We can go to, let's go to 32. As a default view, it is on the selection tool, which I still have set as 1. But then I can do the cut by C. And then we can, let's say we can split this up like so. I can loop this. And as I said, instead of deleting, I prefer to mute. So then I always have that to go back to. So M, I have set up to mute. Let's mute this second one and also the last one. So I can flick back and forth between muting and unmuting. Let's put this back to how it was. Control Z remains for undo. Because I also work with Ableton and they use B for their piano roll draw selection, I've set that up here as well. So B goes straight to the tool instead of, I think it was one of these up here previously. But now B just does that straight away. I have two selections for hiding tracks. Again, I don't really like to delete from the project. Instead, I just like to hide them. But obviously that takes CPU usage in the background, which isn't ideal. So there are two ways. The first one is simply to hide, which is H. So that one just went. Let's put that back. As you can see, it was simply hidden. There was no change to that track status. However, if I do Shift Hide, it's gone again. But if I re-hide, you can see it's now disabled. So what I typically do is things I don't use, or when I've rendered to audio, Shift Hide, and it just puts them here in the to the left. So they're hidden from the project, but they still exist in a disabled state, should I ever need to recall them. You might have noticed the color structure that I have. If you ignore the red ones, which, as I said at the start, are the tracks that I'm focusing on, I really have this green, this blue, this orangey color, and I missed this pinky purple for the leads. So green is kick and bass, blue is percussion, this pinky is leads, Atmos is orange, and then I don't really use vocals, but if I do, they're this yellowy color. But instead of remembering what color I need to select here, I have this set up as a key command. So Alt 1 is kick and bass, Alt 2 is percussion, Alt 3 is leads, Alt 4 is Atmos, and then Alt 5 is the vocals. So let's put this back to 1. So let's say we have this one done, or let's say the screen one is done. We know that's a lead. It's already in the leads subfolder. So we just change that to, there we go, to leads. Job done. I also have channel mutes and solos set up for each of the sub buses here. So I have for kick and bass, leads, Atmos, and percussion, a mute. So let's play the track back as a total, and then I will solo each one of these elements. So then rather than, if I was in a busy part of the mix and I really was focusing on the kick and bass or the percussion, then I can just mute the Atmos and the leads to give a bit more clarity on what I'm focusing on. Also, what it allows me to do is that prior to the final mixdown, I solo just the kick and bass channel, and I listen to that just solo in its entirety for the track to make sure that there's no rogue elements hiding in there that need to be addressed. Once that's done, I will then do the percussion channel, just to make sure that the foundation is rock solid. One function I have also, but I don't really use that much, is Control 1, 2, 3, 4, is just to hide these channels here, or the groups, just to give a bit more clarity if I'm focusing on the project, because it does get a bit busy. So being able to hide those easy is a bit of a workflow saver. I also tend to work with analyzers a lot. I have the reference track that we saw up here. I also have loaded in Vox & Go Span, which is on the second screen. If I ever want to view that, I have that set up as a default workflow state or workflow configuration. So that's I on the keyboard. You'll see that it flickered. That's because it was resetting the state and then opening up Vox & Go Span here. I also have render set up on a key command. So if we loop this section, I can now press R to instantly render that. So we have that here. What I will then do is on the original track, I will press Shift and H to disable and hide. So now I have just the audio track. That was rendered, plus also with the MIDI version saved. One function I missed before when I was soloing the kick and bass and the percussion or the individual sub-buses is I have the full stop or the decimal on the keypad to solo the currently selected track. So I can listen to things in context I can listen to things just along with the kick and bass or the percussion or in context with the Atmos. So let's listen to this lead. It's just solo now. So as you saw, I soloed the lead that I just rendered and then gradually brought the kick and bass and the percussion and the Atmos back in to see how it fits in the track. So there is a quick overview on the key commands. This is just my workflow. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will suit your workflow. The point of the video is just to experiment and find a structure that works for you, because they are incredibly flexible and there isn't much you can't do in Cubase for customizing your own workflow. In the next video, I will go through the macros for how I do some randomization of the lead sounds, randomization of groove agent. So there's quite a few there. That's why I like to split it into 2 videos, just to make it a bit easier to digest. Thank you, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.